Welcome to Punchline Talks, the big interview. My name is Mark Owen, and today my special guest is Dr. Roger Head OBE, very famous for being the chairman of the Pied Piper Appeal, wears lots and lots of hats. Roger, welcome to Punchline Talks.
Thank you, Mark.
Absolutely pleasure to have you on the show today. Where to start, really, because how long have you been in business? And
Well, I'm in my 70s, and I started in business when I was 18.
And what did you actually start doing when you were 18?
I was an apprentice mechanic. I served my time at the Jaguar agents, Kingscote and Stevens, which was at the top of London Road. And then at the age of 18, the company had ceased to exist. It went into liquidation. And I started off repairing vehicles, actually in my father's side entrance. And it was a year or so before I actually got a ramp. But and I then got into not just repairing vehicles, selling vehicles with my late wife. So we were together from the age of 19.
Wow. So when you say selling vehicles, all different types, what's the sort of main selling car at the time then? What year are we talking about?
We sold all sorts of vehicles. Eventually, I mean, I finished in the motor trade in the late 80s. We built a little group of 5 garages together in the county. We had a number of franchise, but we sold a lot of quite exotic cars, a lot of Porsches, Mercedes, Ferraris, that kind of thing. And I particularly did a lot of trading between garages. So it was an enjoyable time, but it was time to leave in the 80s for me. We'd had a fair time in it.
And when the garage, when you're talking about the top of London Road, was
Well,
that
there
the
were a
one
number of garage. Sorry.
Is that where Nick Brody's place used to be as well?
No, my garages were in Southgate Street, St Michael's Square, Worcester Street, one in Worcester and one in Cheltenham.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So from the garages then, didn't you get into mobile phones?
No, that was some time later, and I didn't actually. Mobile phones weren't the major part of the telecommunications business that I started. I started a telecommunications company. Well, actually, my wife started the telecommunications company when we finished in the motor trade. We were then we developed our properties, and it was quite a tough time in the 80s in the recession. I'll talk later that timing in business is really important, and that timing was pretty awful. My wife went and worked for another company, an office equipment company, and they were thinking about doing telecommunications. And the manager there asked if I'd be interested in financing it. We started a company called RHM Telecommunications in the early 90s, and that was very successful. As a matter of fact, I still have that company now.
And you also got into property as well. So what sort of property did you buy or did you see? Because Gloucester itself at the time in the 80s was going through a bit of a tough time as well, wasn't it?
We had a very tough time in the 80s. When I was in the motor trade, what that enabled me to do was to buy a number of sites. And when I finished in the motor trade, I developed those sites probably at the worst possible time. It went very well for the first few years. And then recession came along, half my tenants went bust. Interest rates went up to sort of 17%, and it was a very, very difficult time. And that's really when I had a change of direction and went to telecommunications. I kept those properties that I had in those days, but I then launched with my business partner, a lifelong friend, Jim Ruddy. We got into it in a bit bigger way, really. And now we've got industrial estates, office blocks, shops, flats, quite a big property company.
And where are some of the sites that you're in? I know you've got the one obviously in the Forest of Dean, and you've got, I think, is it Space in Cheltenham?
Yeah, well, it's not actually Space in Cheltenham. It's the Neptune Business Park in Cheltenham, which is just in front of Space. We have a large site in Newent. We've got office block in Cheltenham. We've got a few office blocks in Gloucester, and we have stuff down in the southwest, Totnes and Plymouth. I mean, the largest job that we've actually done, the largest development, is the big Richard Reed site in Longhope, which is over 200,000 square feet of industrial units.
Wow. And has the sort of that side of the business changed a lot from when, from the 90s as it is now, and the type of businesses that you have coming in and out, and the type of business people that you have coming in and out?
It has changed dramatically. Much more regulation. much more compliance, much more looking at the green economy, making sure that we have all electric car chargers. It's just changed, and it's far more expensive to build now. Much more expensive to build units than it used to be. And yes, things have changed from little car dealerships and things. Things have got a lot bigger. We're 80%. We haven't finished the Long Hope site yet. It's not far away, but we're 80% full with really good tenants. What it has done is it's attracted a lot of employment to the Forest of Dean. And what I will say is we used all local labour because, I mean, it has been a 4-year project, and working with the forest people has been an absolute pleasure. They're committed. They're proud of the work that they do, and I'm delighted that we've been able to work with them so well.
How big a site is it now?
And of course, I'm half forest. I lived in Long Hope for 12 years.
You've been friends with Jim Runny a long time. Were you friends as kids?
Friends as teenagers, yeah. We did a lot of sport together. So I've been in business over 30 years with Jim. Primarily, he's of course in catering, fish and chips. But yeah, we have a small collection of classic cars together. And I mean, not only is he a very close business associate, he's my best mate. We speak every day.
Oh, that's always nice to do business. Sometimes it doesn't always work out, does it? Business people and friendship.
No, it doesn't. I'm very lucky. I've got a very healthy partnership.
So going back then, so you started in the property, then you obviously from the cars to the property, and that got you into the mobile phones and the telecommunications sort of side of stuff. How did because that again was quite cutting edge, wasn't it?
It was. I didn't focus. I wasn't really focused on mobile phones. We were focused on network, and we formed a strategic partnership. We were a British Telecom dealer. There were a number of small British Telecom dealers, but we built up quite an important relationship, and we managed a lot of the people coming back from other network providers to British Telecom. We linked our systems with British Telecom. We did a huge amount of business with them in those early days. So it wasn't mobile phones, it was really network and really getting customers back to British Telecom.
When you say you grew it quite big, what kind of size are we talking about? How many people? What sort of turnover?
We had about 100 people working there. It's smaller now. It's become very competitive, and I'm not involved, although I still have a major shareholding in the company. It's not as big, but it's still successful. But it was very successful in the 90s.
I like that's a kind of politician's answer that, because you didn't actually say how many millions it was. But anyway, coming from there, so how did you get into? I mean, you've done so much for charity, but how did you get into Highnam Court? Was it a sort of derelict place at the time? And
well, it was an interesting story, really. I used to fish in the lake when I was a young lad. Probably the age of 9 or 10. I was born. I was born just opposite the rugby club in Siebert Street. So I've always lived in Gloucester, apart from the short time I lived in Long Hope. And when I lived in Long Hope, we used to pass Highnam Court every day. Jenny and I were going back home because, let's say, we worked together in the business. And I always said, one day I'll buy that house. And in 93, it had been for sale then for a number of years, and it was in a very, very poor state. I did actually manage to buy it. I didn't tell my wife until I'd actually purchased it. I mean, we arrived in a January day with water coming in the ceilings, and it was in a dreadful state. And I announced that I'd actually bought it. I knew it was going to be aggravation, and it was. But Jenny did grow to love it as we restored it.
I mean, it must have, like you said, it must be really, really run down. How long did it take you to turn the gardens round and what it is now? Has it just been a labour love all this time?
The labour love. It's been 30 years of hard labour. I love gardening. I work on the garden all the time. And gardens evolve. They're never finished. I mean, it took the first 6 or 7 years to really get the house up together, because it was in a very poor state. See, the gardens they'd have rivaled any of the great gardens in the country in the mid 1800s. But of course, they had nothing done to them for 100 years. So when I came here, they were completely overgrown and we really had to start from scratch. But of course, the important thing that we had was the mature trees. And that is something that, of course, you can't create in a lifetime. But it's been a major undertaking. I was lucky that when I bought the house, I was made aware of a restoration master plan that had been commissioned by English Heritage. And that laid out the principles and methodology of restoration. And in the early days, we were quite faithful to that document. But when Parry set these gardens out, and, Thomas Gambier Parry was the father of Hubert Parry, the great composer who composed Jerusalem. When these gardens were set out, he set them out very much in the garden-esque style, which is an eclectic mix of different gardens within a landscape. And I've tried to continue with that theme, adding different gardens that you move seamlessly between within a landscape.
I think you've done that rather successfully. Whenever I've come through, I've always felt that the sort of different areas, shall we say? And you've also
sorry.
No, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we are the most visited garden under the National Garden Scheme in Gloucestershire. We have been for 25 years. On a busy day, we'll get up to 1,000 people. But I don't really want it to get any busier because we run it entirely with volunteers. We don't do anything here on a commercial basis. And any money that's generated goes to my nominated charities, the main one, of course, being the Pied Piper.
Well, that's a very nice link, actually, to the Pied Piper. You know, obviously it was started originally by Peter Hickman. And how did you get involved with it and then become chairman yourself?
Well, I'd been in the charity sector for a long time. I was involved in the Prince's Trust, but it wasn't really me. I really wanted to do something local. And when Peter Hickman was due to retire, he asked Rennie Frecci, Dame Rennie Frecci, if he knew of anybody who she thought might be able to take over and do the job. Rennie asked Henry Elworth, our old Lord Lieutenant, who's a great friend of mine, and he suggested that I did it. And a bit of persuading from Rennie Frecci, I decided to take it over, and that was in 2003. Peter Hickman had already done 10 years. I think the deal was that I had to do 10 years, so I realised that it was a big commitment. But initially, the Pied Piper was set up really to raise funds for a new children's centre with the redevelopment of the Gloucestershire Royal Hospital. And although it would have been redeveloped anyway, you'd have had far more modest facilities than the wonderful state-of-the-art facility that you have now. I think the Pied Piper raised about £1.5 million towards it, and we saw its completion in 2003, which is when Peter retired. And I decided to broaden the horizons of the Pied Piper, and we also decided to help children not just within a hospital environment, but also in special schools and in the mental health sector. And we also brought under our wing a number of other charities, one of them being Cloud9, which funded last wish holidays for children with life-limited illnesses. And that's all part of the group of things that we actually do in the Pied Piper. I did 10 years chairing the actual appeal, and then Nick Brodie, I got him to be vice, and then he took over as chair, and I now chair the board of trustees.
How did you know?
It seems to be a job that.
How did you know Nick? How did you bump into Nick? Because obviously he's well known as well, being a car dealer.
Nick, I've known Nick since he was in the motor trade. I've known him since he was a youngster, and he's been a friend. A matter of fact, when I bought Highnam Court, I sold him the little lodge that's out on the A40 that floods every so often now.
And also, they changed the whole road network so they could get him get in and out of it as well.
Yeah, well, I won't go into that. That was a mistake by Highways. Nick got blamed for that, but the Highways, when they redeveloped that road, they forgot about his entrance. And then as an afterthought, they put those hatch lines down, which was a disgrace. You know, it should have been thought about in the first place.
Yes, yeah. So anyway, you were chairman for 10 years. Then Nick became chairman. And then you became chairman of the committee, chairman of the board. Is that right?
Of the trustees, of the board of trustees. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So that must be quite a difficult job as well.
it's not so much hard work as it is actually running the appeal and running all the events. But of course, I still get involved in a lot of the events because a lot of events happen here. And at Highnam, we have the motor show. We just had a concert. When we open the gardens, the catering is all done by the Pied Piper volunteers. So it does generate a lot of money. We have an annual charity event that the Masons run here, which is also a big classic car show, and they give a significant contribution to the Pied Piper. So a lot of money is generated, a lot of funds are generated here at Highnam.
You also, Roger, wear lots of other hats as well. Obviously, you got your doctorate from the university. What other things have you done as well on the sort of charity front? I know you don't like to blow your own trumpet too much, but I thought I'd ask.
Okay. I was a board member of the Three Counties Agricultural Society for probably near 20 years. I still serve on the joint committee running the spring show, that's with the RHS. And I retired as chairman of the society last year. That was a lot of work. I was involved in a lot of redevelopment. So that was a big job. I also chaired for 8 years the Gloucestershire Community Foundation. I think you know about the foundation because you've just been on one of their recent events. I was president of the Gloucestershire Society. People have roped me into all sorts of things. I think the only thanks that you get for public service is more public service. But I've enjoyed it all. It's been very rewarding. Henry Elwers made me a deputy lieutenant Devon, and I was High Sheriff in 2015, which that was a big commitment. 300 odd public appointments, a wonderful experience. I mean, promoting philanthropy. All sorts of interesting things that you see in the county that you never really knew existed. So that was quite an experience, and I still chair the committee that selects High Sheriffs.
Wow, I mean, it's an amazing achievement. Of course, you also got your OBE as well. And what year was that? 2016. Roger, have you got your OBE in 2016 as well?
Yes, that was given to me for services to.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, I did. That was for services to charity and other bits and pieces.
Yeah, sorry, the bandwidth has got very slow all of a sudden, so hence the delay. But we are actually running out of time already. Would you believe?
It has, yes. Sorry, I can see there's a bit of a delay.
That's okay. So, can you tell me, please, what's the latest book you're reading?
The latest book.
Yeah.
I read a lot of stuff about the Tudors. I'm very much interested in history, and I give quite a few talks, particularly on the history of Highnam Court and its significance within the Civil War. I read a lot of gardening books. I'm just reading a really good fly fishing book. I'm a very keen fisherman. I fish with a few friends all over the world for trout and salmon. And so, yes, it's a fly fishing book at the moment I'm reading.
Okay. And if I was going to your car and turn on the radio or turn on the music, what would be playing?
Classic FM. I love classic music. I like opera. I go to the opera regularly.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we are running out of time, Roger, so I've got to ask you for your top 3 business tips, please.
Well, look, there's a common denominator when you talk about successful businessmen, and that is hard work. Nobody's successful without working hard, not just in business, but in all aspects of society. And I suppose that's the main thing. When I first started work, I didn't have time to do anything else but work, when I was a youngster. I think you need to stand out. To be very successful, you have to stand out from your competitors. You have to try and think outside of the box. You have to think of different angles, and you have to think about trying to be better than your competitors. But the great thing that I think is sad these days, I mean, I believe in integrity, and a man's word being his bond. When I started in business 50 odd years ago in the motor trade, dealing with other traders and that, If somebody said that's what they would do, that's what they do. Sadly, these days, I see more and more things that disappoint me.
Oh, so yeah, I think it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough sometimes, and there's not a lot I can say to that. But it's a great place to finish, Roger. Roger Head, thanks ever so much for talking to Punchline Talks today. I really appreciate it. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I'm sorry about the time delay. I hope it hasn't stopped your enjoyment. Bye.